Welcome back from the ad break, viewers at home. You are still watching Prime Live. Now, we did mention in our intro when we opened the show that tonight's show will offer you with very, very, very interesting content, and this one in particular is it's going to be very informative, and it's something that I am looking forward to in terms of education and being very well informed. Now, we do know that it's Autism Awareness Month, and my next guest joining me in studio is Tumie Matshego, who is a devoted advocate for autism awareness and inclusion. And in this conversation, we will be speaking about her founding Kaho Autism Advocacy and her dedicating her life to supporting children with autism, especially also children that come from underserved communities. Thank you so much for joining us, Tumi.
Thank you so much for having me, Aisha.
It's a definite pleasure. Now, can you please tell us about what led you to become an advocate and start the Kaho Autism Foundation?
Okay. First and foremost, I'm an awesome mom, so we call ourselves awesome moms.
Awesome mom.
Yeah, so I have a daughter who's 2 years old. Her name is Kaho. And she's 9 years old. She was diagnosed at 2 years old with autism spectrum disorder. And since then, I realized that there's not a lot of education that's out there. There's not a lot of resources that's out there, and a lot of people really need to be told about what autism is, to just eliminate so many misconceptions that come with a child that's on the spectrum. And I noticed that because my child is nonverbal, I needed to be her voice. So from then on, I decided that I'm going to dedicate every single second that I have to be her voice and speak up for her, and not only for her, but for mothers who cannot speak for their children, and even the ones who cannot speak for themselves. So that's where the advocacy started. My daughter was diagnosed at 2 years old. It's been a struggle, to be honest, and it's not an easy journey for any mother with a child who has a disability. So yeah, so this is what led me to start the foundation, and this is why I do advocacy for autism.
So I can tell that it's quite an emotional story, but I want to take you a little bit back, right?
Yes.
As a mom, you said you guys are super moms, and I can attest to that because I've met a lot and also heard a lot of mothers that have children with autism, and I know that it's not something that's easy.
Yes.
Can you take us back to the moment where you had concerns, or you would see that, no man, there's something that's not right, or something that's not normal, or what people would regard normal? What moment kind of sparked that to say, no, I need to check something here?
Yeah,
please tell us about
just
that.
Doesn't seem good off. Okay, so I think I'm lucky that my mom is a nurse, because autism is not prevalent in girls as it is in boys. So you find it more that boys have it more than girls. So girls actually tend to get diagnosed at a later stage. My daughter started speaking, and then I think at about 9 months, her speech just disappeared, which for us was the first red flag. And then from then on, she started having sensory issues where she would walk on her tippy toes. Then there was the hand flapping, the lack of eye contact, the lack of speech. When you compare her to kids who are her peers or on the same age as her, you would see that her speech was not on the same level. And this is when we went to a pediatrician. The pediatrician and then sent us to an educational psychologist. And then from then on, we got our diagnosis. And this is when our journey started. And I want to say that is one of the hardest times, because no parent actually wants to hear that their child is different from what is deemed to be normal, And I always say, when parents get the diagnosis, this is actually the hardest time for them to go through. But you have to pull yourself together, because it's not only you that's relying to be strong in this journey. I mean, my daughter has siblings. I have, family that I had to go and educate and tell them how this journey is going to look like. So yeah.
Your whole life had to now be adjusted for this child,
Yes.
to make sure that they're also living with a family and living in a world that is accepting and also very well informed of the condition. So tell me about, 9 years later,
Yes.
how has the experience been as a mother?
There is a lot of changes that had to happen. Obviously, now you have to find the right schools. Firstly, I'm always saying that there are not enough schools for special needs children in South Africa. And we have been fighting. We have been speaking about this for so long, but not much is being done. The classrooms have to be very small. So obviously when schools are being prioritized, mainstream schools will be prioritized over a school that can only take about 30 to 50 children. So you find that there's not enough schools, there's not enough resources, there's not enough teachers that have been trained in dealing with children living with autism. So the first thing was finding a school, which is really, really hard. Secondly, I think early interventions, where you have to take your children to speech therapists and occupational therapists just to try to make their lives much more easier. But more importantly, I think for me was acceptance. That got me to where we are today, because this is the hardest thing that parents have to go through. To accept that your child is dealing with this is the first and the most important step in your autism journey, to be able to navigate everything. So we started off with that, and then moving on to nutrition. Nutrition is very important. So my daughter, I had to remove her of sugar, and she's lactose free, she's gluten free, but it's also because everything from the brain has to do with the gut. So for us to be able to get her to function and be okay every day and not be hyper, we had to remove sugar altogether from her diet. But things like that, the little tweaks that we had to make, but which are also very expensive tweaks. You know, it's very, very expensive to have a child with a special need. So those little tweaks that we had to do led us to the Kago that I have today, which I find that she's just such a joy. Like when people meet her, they're just like, oh my God, she's so calm. She's such a lady. But it's not the same with all children on the spectrum, because one child is never the same as the next one. So we all have go through difficult and different days. A day will never be the same as yesterday, and you don't really know what to expect. We're all on different meds. You know, one mom will say, my child started this, how did your child experience it? And my child might not experience it the same way as your child, you know. So, yeah, so those are some of the things that we had to change around. But most importantly, I think it's the education system that we really, really need to get right in South Africa. But not only that, the stigmas that surround people living with autism that you encounter on your everyday, and the things that other people really take for granted, that for you, I mean, just going to a restaurant and, you know, people are clapping and singing, for my child is too much sensory overload. She has to cover her ears, or, you know, the kind of restaurants where you take your children and they want to sing happy birthday, all that. For me, I can't take her there. So you don't have a lot of options when it comes to the kind of restaurants you can take her to, the kind of parties she can attend. You always have to ask ahead that, you know, what is the situation going to be like, because she might not be able to handle it. Or then most people end up just staying home because you don't want to expose your child to an environment they will not be comfortable in.
And when we speak about, because you mentioned stigmas, and there's a lot of misconceptions around autism, what are the common misconceptions that you have come across, and how can we address them as a community or as a nation?
I think because the children go through a lot of sensory overload, it could be through sound, it could be through maybe just the texture, it could be through, you know, so many lights, you know, and then when they have a meltdown, or they have, you know, they start stimming at that time just to try to regulate themselves, you would find most people saying, you know, you're a bad parent, you know, why can't you control your child? So things like that, where it's like, oh, bad parenting. But I think also in the African community, you find that there's a lot of witchcraft, you know,
Yes.
a lot of witchcraft that has been, you know, associated with autism. I mean, I've had that. You know, my child was, they've made her keep quiet. She's never going to speak because she's seen things. There's just so many things that you go through that, yeah, unsolicited information and advice. And I'm like, guys, please, you know what I mean? So it's those kind of things where you're already on your, you know, walking on eggshells when you're out in public with your child, because strangers will be staring, or you have to explain, okay, she's doing this because of that, and you don't want to be explaining to every single person that you meet on the street why your child is acting the way they are. So there's just a lot of education that still needs to go, you know, to be put out there, and a lot of advocacy that still needs to go on.
And just before we close the conversation, for those who want to show support to Kago Autism Advocacy, how can they get involved? How can they show you support? How can they reach out?
Okay. So we started the Kago Advocacy, Autism Advocacy, because we wanted to bring resources to children in previously disadvantaged areas. There's a lot of need for play areas. There's a lot of need for toys, sensory toys. There's a lot of need for occupational therapists or speech therapists to just offer their time, because most of these children cannot afford to go to speech therapy. They cannot afford to be taken to occupational therapists. So we appeal to professionals to just come forward and just, you know, dedicate maybe an hour or two of a weekend just to see one or two children. And not even that, even if there's, you know, family psychologists that can be with a family that just got a diagnosis, and just sit with them and tell them how their journey is going to be like. So we take on any donations in any form just to try to help out, you know, just to try to help out those communities, like the education centers, the creches, and also to educate the teachers and to show them what exactly they are that they're dealing with, because most of the teachers are not even trained to deal with children on the spectrum. So yeah, so that's what we do for Kaho Autism Advocacy.
No, Tumie, thank you so much for joining us. And I
Thank
really
you.
wish we had more time, because I
I
was
also
learning
do.
so much. I was learning so much. I do think
Yes.
that this is a conversation that needs to be spoken about more often, because we still need a lot of education. We still need a lot of information in terms of it. But you are a super mom, and continue being a super mom for
Thank
also
you.
other super moms.
You know
And
what?
thank you so much for creating that community.
Thank you so much. And I've just, you know, I've just been lucky that I've got a lot of support. I think the first thing I always say to people is please support any parents or any family that you know has a child living with autism, because it's definitely not an easy journey to walk through. So support is very, very, very important for them to go through. And April is Autism Awareness Month.
Yes.
So yeah, so please, when you get a chance to talk about it, please do. And please follow us on Kaho Autism Advocacy. If you need any information, if you need, you know, whatsoever that has to do with autism, we can send through information to be able to educate more people out there. And I hope this is only the beginning.
Definitely. And thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully, I don't know, producers are listening, we can have you
Yeah.
again. It's still April. The
Yes.
month is still
Yes.
long. So
Yes.
we can, you know, dissect and go into more details on what you were talking about. But I'm very well informed, so I really enjoyed this conversation.
I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Viewers at home, that was an amazing conversation that I had with Tumie regarding Autism Awareness Month. And I am leaving, or I'm left leaving. I am left very much well educated and informed. And if anything, I am really, really saluting all the super moms out there, and mothers that have to, you know, or mothers and families that are living with kids that have autism. But without wasting any time, we will go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we still have more for you, so stay tuned.